Ladies and gentlemen, in this digital and fast-paced world, we believe that the fair use of social media campaigning and news outlets are realistic and much more accessible tools for people to make their decision to vote. Hence why, as the leader of the opposition, this House believes that the political general knowledge tests are not effective tools to use in regulating the voting system. I would like to first respond to the Prime Minister's statement and say no, that we do not agree that political knowledge tests are relevant and urgent to make people more knowledgeable voters. This is because of the three reasons that are already mentioned by the Prime Minister. Firstly, they said that effective decision making is a part of a result of taking this political general knowledge test. However, one's decision making is not necessarily driven by one's ability to pass a test. Take the most simple and common example of people in school and taking their test. Just because someone passes a test with flying colors doesn't necessarily mean that they are people who can make decisions not rationally. Many leaders in the business world failed their school years and ended up being great leaders who are known to make effective and critical decisions. This is again an example of how effective decision making has nothing to do with your ability to pass a series of questions and to answer these series of questions. Moreover, the point of citizens being able to know the facts is not being able to know all the facts is not a realistic point, as it is impossible for someone to know all of the sides of a story from a single test, especially a single one-time test. Especially as the Prime Minister mentioned, the test is about the basic concepts of political sides. Firstly, there are already too many political beliefs, and there are so many broad ways of looking at political beliefs. And so if we are going to narrow it down to just one single test, even an individual will not be able to absorb all of the information at once, and they will probably not be able to really understand what the political system really is. There are also many branches and viewpoints about each political party that we have here, and that can be explained just from a single one-time test. And even if they are able to get the resources from credible sources, that doesn't mean that they can get rid of the bias that we all have as humans. It is not possible for us to provide a neutral test by a neutral side. As we have the government who will probably conduct this test due to the economic incentives that it will need, then it is not possible to create a neutral test because the government itself is already biased. The government is a part of a political party, of a side of a political party. So it's not possible to conduct this test neutrally. And the government this proposition that the government can be unbiased is unrealistic and out of touch with reality. And so now I would like to bring about my points in arguing. I would like to bring about two main points. And firstly, it's the economic and social limitations of creating this general knowledge test for the population. And secondly, we would like to propose the easier and much more accessible use of social media to educate the masses, which has been proven to be effective in all of these years. To start, looking at the current status quo, people are already not willing to participate in the elections for various reasons. We don't know exactly why, but people are not willing to participate in elections, maybe because they don't have the time and effort to actually get to the election places, or they just don't want to participate in political action. And if we are going to implement this political knowledge test, that means that we are restricting people who can vote to people who are only knowledgeable for the political schemes. And this comes back to the point that the Prime Minister said, that a lot of people just don't want to share their political knowledge to other people. And so this already proves that not a lot of people want to learn about politics. And so if we are further narrowing it down to people who can only learn about further narrowing it down that people who vote are people who actually know about politics, then there will be such a reduced amount of participation from the already small number that we have now. And it is only unfair because we are further restricting people who do not have access to the education or the test that will be conducted. This is proven by the economic incentives that it will need for us to conduct this actual test. Governments will need to spend a large amount of budget to actually create this test and to distribute it evenly to populations. And given that in Indonesia, almost 50% of our population lives below the poverty line and hence has less access to education and information, this will be a much harder approach for us to actually educate all of these people when they don't even have the access to basic education. So if they don't have access to basic education, how can they get access to this more advanced political general knowledge test or political general knowledge education? And furthermore, the minimum age to vote is actually 18 years old here in Indonesia. And if we decide to create this general knowledge test, it will mean that most likely the people who are ready to vote are people who are already out of schools. So they don't have a cohesive system or an actual system that regulates how they learn, where they learn, and actually provides them a tool or an outlet for them to learn about these political general knowledge tests. And as we know, people who are not regulated by systems, who are not in school or in a system of work or things like that, will most likely not join this political general knowledge test because they are not being coerced to actually do these tests. And if people are actually in school or people are in work, they actually have people who can help channel this information and channel this incentive, and they can actually do it. But that is not the case, and so this is unrealistic. While at the same time, we also want to add on that the Prime Minister mentioned that they wanted to target marginalized communities and people below the poverty line. But again, coming back to our point of the economic and social limitations, how will you do that if you do not have the budget nor the outlets to actually provide basic education itself? And now I would like to get back to my point of social media being a much more effective and accessible tool for political parties to campaign their beliefs and to campaign their programs. As we have seen throughout the years, not just in the US nor in Indonesia, most political parties are already using various social media outlets as well as news outlets to provide people with their programs, their incentives, and their beliefs, their vision and mission for the country. People have seen debates broadcasted on TV, and people have seen the various responses of political parties and political figures about certain issues through Twitter or Instagram or any other platform that provides a voice for these political parties. And it is much more likely for people to actually open their social media or open news outlets to look at TV or to look at their gadgets to get this information rather than going to take tests. To take tests, which means that people are actually forced to learn. People are forced to actually have the time and effort to take this test, while social media is much more effortless and a much more natural way of communicating and of people to address certain issues. And so this house believes that social media is a much more accessible and much more realistic tool to use to regulate the voting system instead of using the unrealistic and impossible use of political general knowledge tests. Thank you.